Why do people blush? Hey, I'm G. Let me ask you, why do people blush? Maybe you wondered about that sudden rush of heat that turns your cheeks a bright pink when you're caught off guard, embarrassed, or even thrilled. Today, we're diving into the biology, the psychology, and the cultural meanings and the legal historical background of blushing. Welcome to the Stuff You Should Think About, where I tackle everyday questions about the phenomena and objects around you in quick, bite-sized episodes. I do the digging so you don't have to, and I bring the answers back in a way you can read on your coffee break, on your way to work, or whenever you've got a little free time. Before we get started, just a quick heads up. I'm not a medical doctor or a neuroscientist. I'm just a curious person who spent a few weeks poring over peer-reviewed articles, classic psychology textbooks, and anthropological field notes so you don't have to. My goal isn't to tell you what to think or what to do. It's to explain how the blush system works from a big picture perspective. And also to point you toward the sources that help me piece this puzzle together. The journey to understanding why people blush isn't a single event. It's a cascade of psychological and cognitive steps. Let's break it down. Some of the steps and what happens in a real world analogy are social trigger. Something social salient occurs. Being called out, receiving a compliment, or recalling an awkward memory. The real world analogy of that is like a sudden alarm bell that tells your brain, pay attention. Cognitive appraisal. Your frontal cortex evaluates the event. Is this embarrassing? Is it a social threat? The real world analogy is a judge weighing evidence before issuing a verdict. Emotional response. The amygdala flags the situation as emotionally charged, often as shame or self-consciousness. The real-world analogy is a fire alarm that lights up when smoke is detected. Automatic aviation. The sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system releases norepinephrine, priming the fight or flight response. Real world analogy, a car revving its engine before a race. Vasodilation of facial vessels. Blood vessels in the face, mainly the superficial facial vein and the maxillary artery, relax, allowing a surge of warm blood to the skin. Real world analogy, open a garden hose at full pressure, flooding a small area with water. Visible redness and warmth. The skin's thin epidermis lets the blood's color show through. Thermoreceptors register the heat, giving you the sensation of feeling hot. Real world analogy, glow-in-the-dark sticker that lights up when exposed to UV light. Last one being feedback loop. Seeing your own flushed face can reinforce the emotional state, sometimes intensifying the blush. Real world analogy, a mirror that reflects your own smile back, making you grin wider. Each of these steps is necessary, but not sufficient on its own. If any link in the chain is missing, say the cognitive appraisal doesn't register the event as embarrassing, you may not blush even though your heart is racing. Even though blushing can be a hot topic in the realms of psychology, sociology, and even politics, think public shaming debates. There are a few things that most people agree on. Universality. Across cultures, a flushed face is recognized as a signal of self-conscious emotion. Whether you're in Tokyo or Toronto, people tend to interpret the pink hue as a cue that someone feels exposed or emotionally aroused. Evolutionary signal. Most agree that blushing likely evolved as a nonverbal apology, a way to show sincerity, humility, or remorse without needing words. Health indicator. A sudden blush can reveal underlying medical conditions, e.g., hyperthyroidism. Healthcare professionals concur that persistent facial redness deserves a checkup. Social utility. In many professional settings, a brief blush can humanize a speaker, making them appear more relatable and trustworthy, a point often emphasized in public speaking coaching. The earliest documented discussion of blushing dates back to ancient Greek philosophy. Aristotle, 384 to 322 BCE, described the reddening of the face as a sign of shame. Later, Hippocrates noted that a flushed complexion could signal an imbalance of the bodily humors. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, when the church linked blushing to piety, the blush of the soul, implying that a modest, reddening face reflected inner virtue. In the 18th century Enlightenment, philosophers like David Hume and Jean Jacques Rousseau debated whether blushing was a psychological manifestation of moral feeling versus a cultural performance. Their debates laid the groundwork for modern emotion research. While you won't find a blush act or any statute books, the phenomenon creeps into legal reasoning in two notable ways. One being witness credibility and jury perception, and the other being employment discrimination claims. The first one, witness credibility and jury perception. In People versus Smith, 1978, New York, a defense attorney argued that the defendant's blushing while testifying indicated honesty, influencing the jury's perception of credibility. Though not a binding rule, the case illustrates how facial cues are informally weighed in courts. Employment discrimination claims. Some workplaces have faced lawsuits alleging that policies requiring professional composure indirectly discriminate against individuals with rosacea or other conditions causing facial redness. The EEOC versus XYZ Corp. 2015 settlement required the employer to accommodate medical conditions that cause chronic facial flushing, setting a precedent for appearance-based discrimination claims. Now, I want to be transparent about my own bias. I tend to celebrate the evolutionary narrative, the idea that blushing is nature's sophisticated social signal. I'm fascinated by how subtle psychological quirks can shape massive cultural practices, from courtrooms to reality TV. But I also recognize my limitations. I'm not a dermatologist, so my grasp of the medical nuances of chronic facial arrhythmia is pretty shallow. I also tend to downplay the social constructivist angle, which argues that blushing means heavily shaped cultural scripts rather than hardwired biology. Keeping both lenses in mind helps me avoid oversimplifying a complex phenomenon. To put things in perspective, let's look at a historical parallel: the emergence of public apologies in the Victorian era. Then, in the late 19th century, a gentleman caught in a social scandal would often write a letter of contrition and physically bow before the offended party. Bowing, like blushing, was a visible bodily cue of humility. Now, today, the same social repair often happens through a public statement, followed by a visible emotional display, sometimes a blush, sometimes tears. Human societies repeatedly develop embodied signals, bowing, blushing, kneeling, to convey remorse or vulnerability. The underlying need to reestablish trust after a breach remains consistent even after the specific gesture changes. There's no single path forward when it comes to dealing with the social and medical challenges surrounding blushing. Here are a few different approaches people are taking. Mind body training. These techniques, like biofeedback, progressive muscle relaxation, and mindfulness meditation, help individuals recognize and modulate the sympathetic response that triggers facial vasodilation. Pharmacological management. For chronic conditions like hypothyroidism, doctors prescribe beta blockers, alpha agonists, or topical brimidine to reduce facial blood flow. Dress code redesign. Companies are updating dress code policies to accept natural facial redness as a normal variation, reducing the pressure to hide one's blush. Virtual reality exposure. VR simulations of socially stressful scenarios let users practice staying calm, gradually desensitizing the emotional trigger that leads to blushing. Cultural reframing campaigns. NGOs in certain regions are running media campaigns that celebrate the blush as a sign of authenticity, turning a perceived weakness into a badge of honor. Cosmetic solutions. Some individuals use green tinted primers, full coverage foundations, or laser therapy to mask chronic redness. While effective for appearance, these do not address the underlying psychological cause. These strategies are not mutually exclusive. A person with rosacea might combine a dermatologist's prescription with mindfulness practice and a supportive workplace culture to feel both healthier and more socially comfortable. So, what should you think about when it comes to why people blush? It's a multi-stage process: a social trigger, cognitive appraisal, emotional response, autonomic activation, facial validation, visible redness, and a feedback loop. It's both biological and cultural. The physiological cascade is universal, but the meaning we attach to a flushed face varies across societies and historical periods. It carries evolutionary weight. Blushing likely evolved as a nonverbal apology that signal sincerity, humility, and emotional honesty. It has legal and health implications, from courtroom credibility to anti-discrimination law. The blush can influence outcomes far beyond the moment it appears. There's no cure-all. Managing blushing may involve mind-body techniques, medication, workplace policy shifts, or even reframing the cultural narrative. In short, a blush is a tiny, involuntary fireworks display that packs a huge social punch. Understanding its mechanics gives you a better toolbox for empathy, whether you're the one turning pink or the one observing, trying to interpret the rosy signal. That's it for today's episode of The Stuff You Should Think About. Thanks for listening. If you found this deep dive helpful, hit subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. Have you ever been caught off guard by a blush, or is there a different everyday mystery you'd like me to untangle next time? Until then, stay curious. This post is for informational purposes only. Statements are based on current scientific understanding and publicly available information.